Good morning, good morning. Good morning to those that are here in person. Good morning to those that are on Facebook Live. And we are going to get started right away. I know usually take a couple of minutes to get situated, but we are, as Larry says, we are on Rosh Chodesh time. We're starting the class, as you may have noticed, at 10:20, because of course this morning was a longer davening. So I want to wish you all a Chodesh Tov. And I want to welcome you to the Siddur Unpacked Lesson 5. And it is titled, A Wrap Up to Remember. And it's actually very appropriate this week that we are going to be doing this class today, because in the Siddur, we are on page 10 and 11, and we are going to be discussing the next part of davening. Once you finish the morning blessings, which usually are done in the home, you come to shul, and the first thing you do in shul is you make a blessing on Tzitzit, or Tallit, and a blessing on Tefillin. And these two are done together at the same time. We'll soon see why, and we'll soon see how that works, and a little bit of background to these mitzvot. But why is it so appropriate that we're doing this today? It's so appropriate that we're doing this today because in the Sefer HaMitzvot, which is the daily mitzvah regiment, for those of you that are familiar, the Rebbe introduced a cycle, which now, Baruch Hashem, hundreds of thousands of Jews around the world do every single day, which is to study Rambam, or Maimonides, every single day. And the way that this is done is, there's 3 tracks. One track is to do 1 chapter of Rambam a day, another track is to do 3 chapters of Rambam a day, and another track is to do just a mitzvah a day, as per the 3 chapters a day. In other words, you're following with them. Same system, but you only do the mitzvah and a brief description of the mitzvah, instead of doing the whole 3 chapters, etc. Now, obviously, it depends who you are, and whether you're employed, or you're a student, or whether you're retired, or whether you have more time or less time, and everyone should strive to do 3 chapters a day, but whatever you're up to, you're up to. Either way, in the 3-chapter cycle, which means also in the mitzvah cycle, today is the mitzvah of tzitzit. Today we study the mitzvah of tzitzit. And that's also what we're holding in the Siddur. We're holding on page 10, which is after a Jew, well, really at the bottom of page 9 and then page 10. We'll soon see why. But I guess you can open your Siddur to page 9. We are going to do the mitzvah of tzitzit. Now, these 2 mitzvahs, tzitzit and tefillin, belong to a category of mitzvot which I will call mnemonics, or reminders. As early as kindergarten, we start to get mnemonics and reminders and ways of remembering things, right? Anybody remember, excuse me, anybody remember the song they learned in kindergarten? To be able to remember the ABCs, right? And as you get a little older, you have different ways and tricks and songs to remember the days of the month, and how many days in each month, right? Some sort of variation of the poem, 30 Days Has September. Anybody know that one? Yeah. No? Okay. All right. That's what they were teaching when I was in school. Anybody familiar with the acronym PEMDA? PEMDAS? P-E-M-D-A-S? That's the order of mathematical operations, parentheses, then exponents, then multiplication and division, addition and subtraction. That's the order in which you're supposed to do math. All these different mnemonics that they come up with. Should I try one more? So far, nobody has known any of them.
I'm a product of...
You need what?
I knew 30 days of September.
Oh, you knew 30 days of September, okay.
Yeah,
I think you have to go to Hebrew
unified,
school.
So, okay, do you know a different one? You know what I'm talking about, these different things that they come up with, right?
My grandkids know them all, and they start singing, like, don't you know them, Grandma? How did you miss out?
We had one
years ago.
Yeah, we had one in this class. It was for the 5 grains?
Oh.
Remember? Ben Sion gave us one. What was it? 5 grains are wheat, barley, brows. That's what it was. Brows, as in eyebrows, was the 5 grains halachically. Ben Sion Chin came up with one for us on the spot. Barley, rye, oats, wheat, spelt. That's the 5. Right? Brows. You have to remember somehow that brows is the acronym, because I forgot that. Anyways, but long before any of these acronyms, and long before any of these other ones. By the way, there's one more they bring at the end of the class. What do they call it? The guy's name, I never heard this one before. For the colors of the rainbow. Anybody ever heard of Roy G. Biv?
Yes.
Oh, that one you heard of? Good. Yes. We got a score. Roy G. Biv apparently is for the colors of the rainbow in order. Right? In order?
Yes.
Red, orange, yellow, blue, green, blue, indigo, violet. No, you didn't have that either? Okay. Either way, long before any of these acronyms or mnemonics or songs to remember things, the Torah also wants us to remember something. The Torah tells us in the Chumash, in the 5 books of Moses, the Torah says that you have to, we can even quote it because it's directly from, we say it every day as part of the Shema. Vayomer Hashem Moshe. Let me open it up and then I'll say the words right. Lamor, God says to Moses to tell the Jewish people, Dabra, when they shall speak to the Jewish people, V'amarta aleim, and say to them, V'asu lehem tzitzit, they should make for themselves fringes, al kanfei lideim l'darotam, on the corners of their garments for generations. V'natnu al tzitzit ha'kanaf v'til techelet, and you should put fringes and different colors, the white and the blue strand, etc. And you will have these tzitzit, and you will see them, and you will remember all of the mitzvot. So this was the first mnemonic, the first way of remembering something. Similar, remember here, I've never seen anybody do this in real life, but tying a string around your finger to remember something.
Yeah.
Anybody ever hear this?
Yeah.
Right? So, I've never heard anybody doing that in real life, but I've seen it in many books, like cartoon books or whatever, they tie something around their finger. Oh, I'll tell you one that I do in real life. Oh wow, this is an interesting one. Not relevant to any of you, but I have young children, and I think the city of Los Angeles or whoever it is pays for some billboards around town not to forget your children in the back of the car, right? Because even in I saw a stat, even in 60 degrees, it takes like 10 minutes or something, and for a child to have heat stroke and lose many whatever it is. So especially if it's hot outside, but even when it's not hot outside, most notably if I have my daughter or back when it was my son in the car and it's not per my regular schedule. In other words, Sunday she's always here with me, right? But if it's sometimes it's not with my regular schedule and she's in the car, I want to not forget that she's in the car, and maybe I'm worried that I'm going to, especially if she's sleeping and she's not making any noise, so I'll untie my shoe. Because if I come out of the car and I see my shoe is untied, right, I just leave my shoe untied for the whole drive. My left shoe, obviously, my right shoe is driving, but the left shoe I'll leave it untied. Like this, when I get out of the car, I'm like, why is my shoe untied, right? Nobody walks with their shoes untied. And then I remember that she's in the car. Thank you, Anna, for such a delicious breakfast. Have a great day.
Aren't we wearing those things for the hostages too?
Yeah, but that's to not that they should always be on your mind. Yeah, but it's a similar concept. Similar concept that they should always be on your mind. Yes. So tzitzit and tefillin, as we are going to see, are both supposed to be the same thing. Good morning, Gitti. So before any of these memory tricks, the Jewish people had their own system, which is a system of fringes that we wear on us. Now, you will notice that there are two types of tzitzit that we wear. By you, I mean mainly the men, I guess. But the women, I'm sure I've seen them. That the men walk around with tzitzit. But by the way, let's just get that out of the way quickly. The reason that women are not obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzit, I don't want to get too sidetracked about the reason that men and women are chayav, are obligated in different mitzvot. But just a very brief overview on that. It'll take me 3 minutes. It's probably worth it. Men and women do not have separate souls. Have a great day, Yasel. They have two halves of the same soul. Yes? Everybody familiar with that? If you've been to any chuppah, you'll have heard them say, we are gathered here for this momentous occasion of the reunification of two halves of one soul. In other words, we brought Gitti as the show and tell here. Gitti and I have two halves of one soul. Gitti has the feminine version of that soul, the feminine half of that soul, and I have the masculine version of that soul. Now those two halves together are meant to accomplish all of the different mitzvot, and each one has a different role. So I go to the mikveh, but I don't go to the mikveh as per the way a woman goes to the mikveh. I don't have children, as Gitti is constantly reminding me. No, I'm joking. That was just a joke. I thought she would hear it, but she didn't. I don't have children, and I also am not the one who's tasked with bringing up those children. Sure, I have to educate together with Gitti, but it's primarily the woman's job to be the mainstay of the home and keep the home going in a way of Torah and mitzvah. And the man's job is, obviously, lots of things that is the man's job. Because the woman has this central role of operating the home, so therefore any mitzvot that are time-bound mitzvot, which means mitzvot that have a time clock on them, you got to put on tefillin by this time, right? Women don't put on tefillin. You got to wear tzitzit only by any mitzvot that are a positive commandment. They're obligated in all the negative commandments the same way as men. All the same obligations of not eating certain things and not doing work on Shabbat or whatever it is. But when it comes to positive commandments, mitzvot that we are obligated to do, women are only obligated in the ones that are not time-bound. There are certainly, that's a general rule, and that's the general explanation. There are certain exceptions that are they obligated in Shema? It's a good question, I have to look it up. But you're segueing into another point, which I should make, which is very important to make probably. Just because a woman is not obligated in a mitzvah doesn't mean she can't do it. She absolutely can do it, right? And it would be beautiful for her to do it. And there's many, many mitzvot like that. For example, davening, right? Women are not obligated to daven because they're all time bound, shachrit, mincha, arvit, etc. But if a woman has that time, a woman should, right? The same thing can be said for Shema. But could be I don't. To the best of my understanding, there is no obligation for a woman to say Shema twice a day. But of course, if she can, she should, because it is a mitzvah. It basically, they don't become non-mitzvot for the woman. They become like conditional mitzvot for a man. So just like a man, for example, is not obligated to wear tzitzit. Everybody knows that? A man is not obligated to wear tzitzit. A man is obligated, if he has a four-cornered garment, he should put on tzitzit. Now we choose to do that, to have a four-cornered garment, to put tzitzit on them, etc. Why? Because we want to fulfill that mitzvah. So basically every mitzvah that is time-bound for a woman becomes like that. Becomes, you're not obligated to it, but it would be a beautiful thing if you did it. By the way, I don't know why I went with tzitzit. Tzitzit is a conditional mitzvah. Let's just go with like optional mitzvah. Hosting guests. There is never a time when you are obligated to host guests. Right? But it's a mitzvah. If you ever host guests, it's a mitzvah. Right? Or lending someone money, or giving tzedakah. There's never a time that you're obligated to give tzedakah at a certain time. There are customs before davening and this and whatever. Right? But they're all wonderful mitzvahs. So for a woman, every positive commandment that is not time-bound becomes like those mitzvahs. Kind of voluntary, optional mitzvah. Yes?
So if you say the prayers, like they say, like you do it 3 times, then you become obligated. Is that so?
Not for a woman. Not for a woman. You're talking about any mitzvah that if we do it 3 times and we don't say bli neder, it's considered, bli neder means without a vow, it's considered like a vow. And actually every year on the day before Rosh Hashanah, we take off those vows. But yes, if you do something good 3 times in a row, you're supposed to keep doing it. That does not apply to a woman, because automatically she has a larger obligation, which looms larger than those other obligations. Does that make sense? Okay, I said we weren't going to get sidetracked, but here we are, right? Okay, so back to tzitzit. So what is tzitzit and how are tzitzit supposed to work? So you may have noticed that there are 2 types of tzitzit. I'm wearing tzitzit right now. It's called Tallit katan. If you think it's just the fringes, it's not just the fringes. Under my shirt, I have basically a little poncho, right? Like a piece of cloth that has 4 garments, and then the center has a hole for the head. And there's a minimum size. Obviously, if you're wearing a little kerchief, doesn't mean you need tzitzit. It's a minimum size it needs to be. And if you're wearing it, then you're obligated in tzitzit. Now, I wear this 24/7. I mean, whatever. Obviously, I'm in the shower and etc. But like, I wear it when I sleep. I wear it when I wake up. I wear it all the time. Right? You change them. You have multiple pairs, etc. Right? I have a running pair of tzitzit, for example. That would be quite gross, especially since it's wool. You sweat in it, it starts to really reek. Right? I have a running pair of tzitzit, then I change out to a regular pair. Anyways. And then there is, of course, the Tallit Gadol, which basically just means the small tzitzit and the big tzitzit. Or the small shawl and the big shawl. But Tallit Gadol, many of you saw us wearing them right now, or you were wearing them just now for prayers, but we only wear that during prayers. Now, really, this is to satisfy, you're not going to be surprised by this, because there's so many mitzvot that we do in a specific way just to satisfy 2 different opinions. As usual, there are 2 different opinions, but the halacha follows one of them. In other words, there's a law, the way you're supposed to do it. And that is that even the small tzitzit count. But according to some opinions in the Talmud, again, which we do not rule according to, but it is an opinion, if we could fulfill what we want to, there is an opinion that basically, because the blessing of tzitzit, as you'll see in a moment, says lehit atef b'tzitzit, which means to enwrap yourself in tzitzit, that's a much larger one. A small one, this small pouch, you can't wrap yourself in it. You can just put it on yourself. But you can't wrap yourself in it. The Tallit Gadol, as you all know, when we put it on, we first wrap ourselves, then we wear it as they would have worn it back in the day, which is a long draping down shawl. I've seen everything okay? Okay. As a long shawl draping down, right? So because there is an opinion that that's where you're supposed to wear tzitzit, so therefore we don't wear it all day, but at least for davening we put it on it to fulfill that obligation. Let's read a little bit about tzitzit before we get into what it reminds us of and how it reminds us of it, etc. Let's read a little bit about tzitzit. You have one? Here you go. We're on page 68, text 1. Angie, if you can get us started, page 68, text 1. This is from the Shulchan Aruch, from the Jewish Code of Law, where the Alter is going to tell us that it is proper to wear tzitzit at all times, especially during prayer. Go ahead.
One is not obligated to buy a garment with 4 corners so that he will be required to attach tzitzit to it. Rather, only if he desires to wear a 4-cornered garment is he required to attach tzitzit to it. Nevertheless, it is preferable and appropriate for everyone to be careful and eager to wear a tallit with tzitzit throughout the day so that he will remember the mitzvah at every moment. To explain by example, if someone cautions their friend to remember something, they will tie a knot in their friend's belt as a reminder. Accordingly, the tzitzit at each corner has 5 knots that recall the 5 books of the Torah, and there are 4 corners so that whichever direction a person turns, he will remember the mitzvah.
Okay, so let's talk about the different memory techniques that there are in the tzitzit. If you want to follow with me, I'm on page 59. So number one, the way that tzitzit remind us of the mitzvot, again, to quote, it says, it says, you will see the tzitzit and you will remember all of the mitzvot of Hashem. The way that works is as follows. Raise your hand if you're familiar with gematria. Gematria means numerical value, right? Every letter of the Hebrew alphabet is ascribed a number. Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Yud is 10, Chaf is 20, etc. Right? So if you take the word tzitzit, you have Tzadik Yud, which is 90, 10, 90, 10. So that's 200. And then you have a Taf, which is 400. So together that is 600. Okay? Then you have 5 knots on each corner. And you have 8 strings on each corner. So 5 and 8 is, you're doing the math already ahead of me. 5 and 8 is 13. So we have 613. It reminds you of the 613 mitzvot. So that is the first way that looking at the tzitzit reminds us of the mitzvot. And there are stories of people, who were in very tempting situations. The Talmud is full of stories of people who were in very tempting situations. Maybe they were being seduced by someone, or they were about to commit some sort of grave sin. They held on to their tzitzit because they really wanted to remember, etc. So that's the way it's supposed to remind us. Okay, there are a few other ways. As we just mentioned from the Shulchan Aruch, the 5 knots are supposed to symbolize the 5 books of the Torah. Okay, so that's and that's in each direction. Why? Because in each direction it's supposed to be the 5 books of the Torah, remind you of the Torah. No matter which direction you turn, it should remind you of them. So you have 4 corners, 4 times 5, each time the 5 books of Moses, reminding us of the Torah. And then you have the 2 front corners. The 2 front corners are obviously more readily visible to every single person. And we are taught that Kabbalistically they have a higher level of Kedusha, of holiness. The men will be familiar that during Shema, we hold all 4 tzitzit, but during Baruch She'amar, we only hold the front 2. This is why it's appropriate, whatever way you can figure it out, to make sure that you always put your tzitzit on the same way. So the same front 2 should always be the front 2. With the Tallit, that's a little easier because it has the crown, and you always put the crown above your head anyways. But with the ones that you wear on your body, they're technically reversible. My personal way to remember is that there's usually a tag that says the size, and I just always put that in the back. And then the front 2 tzitzit are always the same front 2 tzitzit. Now, why are they holy? What's extra about them? Because they're more readily visible, so they actually have another few things they remind us of. Number one is each one of them has 5 knots, right? So together that makes 10. That reminds us of the 10 Sefirot. Yes, this is a little bit more Kabbalistic. The 10 Sefirot with which God created the world and with which God operates the world. The 10 godly attributes, if you will. If you're not familiar with them, that's fine. But if you add the 10 knots and then add the 8 and 8 strings, so 16 strings, what do you end up with? 26, Gematria, and these Fardim here. What is 26? The name of God. Thank you. 26 is the numerical value of Yud, and then Hey, and then Vav, and then Hey, which is the name of God, the Tetragrammaton, as it's called. God's ineffable name. So in this way, when we look at it, we're also reminded of God. We're reminded of God in His purity, in His name, and then God, the way He interacts with the world through these 10 attributes, the 10 Sefirot. How's that for a little Kabbalah for you? Okay. Back to page...
This gematria, people really spend a lot of time figuring how the numbers of this equal this.
Oh, absolutely. Because the Torah, being godly wisdom, contains within it many, many layers of truth. And while it is true that gematria, which is the codes or the numerical values of the words, that's not the most obvious explanation of the Torah. It doesn't. When people say that, it's not taking away from the simple translation of the Torah. That the Torah isn't trying to tell us that there was a man named Moses and there were, many Jews that he took out of Egypt. No, that's all still true. But there's an additional layer of meaning because it's godly wisdom that's hidden within the words, and that's gematria helps us discover that. So that's why some people spend a lot of time on gematria. Okay. Back to page 69. Larry, if you can keep us going. At the top of page 69, even
someone who cannot wear tzitzit throughout the day should at least make a point of wearing tzitzit during the times that he recites the Shema and prays.
Okay. Now, when you put on the tzitzit, Michelle is going to read for us the 2 blessings that we make. So we're in the Siddur now on page 9. Jumping back and forth here. On page 9, at the bottom of page 9, this is the blessing you make if you are not going to wear a Tallit Gadol. For example, in the Chabad world, you only start wearing a Tallit Gadol when you pray after you're married. Right? Yeah. So until then, you're still wearing a Tallit Katan, so you're still fulfilling the mitzvah. But this is the blessing you would make a talit katan. Go ahead. Blessed are you.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us concerning the mitzvah of tzitzit.
Okay. Now, once you start wearing a talit gadol, or if, let's say, you're not Chabad and you wear a talit gadol already from bar mitzvah, right? So then there's a process as to how you put on the talit gadol. You're still in the Siddur, Michelle, if you can read for us. So, page 10, it is the Chabad custom down to the talit and tefillin before page 22. Stand with the folded talit on the right shoulder and the 4 tzitzit in front. Examine the tzitzit, make sure they are not torn. And while you're doing so, you recite these 4 lines on page 10. Go ahead, Michelle.
My soul, bless the Lord. Lord my God, you are greatly exalted. You have garbed yourself with majesty and splendor. You enwrap yourself with light as with a garment. You spread the heavens as a curtain.
Okay, and then once you finish examining them to make sure that they're kosher, for those that are wondering what you're examining first of all to make sure that there's strings on all of them, they haven't gotten ripped or tangled or whatever it is. And you're trying to make sure there's 8 on each one, right? And that the 5 knots are still there. Sometimes it comes undone. And now you make a blessing. So before we make the blessing, Bob, you want to read for us? So
precious?
Not yet. In text 2, we're jumping back and forth here. Do you have a book?
Oh, yes.
Text 2 in the book is where the Shulchan Aruch, the Jewish Code of Law, tells us to make this blessing. Go ahead. When one
enwraps himself in a tzitzit, he should have the intent that the Holy One, blessed be He, commanded him to enwrap himself in tzitzit, so that he recall all of his mitzvot and perform them as it is written, and you shall see it, and you shall remember all the mitzvot of God.
Okay, and then we make the blessing. So now you can read for us on page 10, the blessing, bouncing back and forth.
Got it.
Blessed are you. Oh, no, they don't have it in English. Interesting.
How precious?
No, they don't have it in English, but the blessing, you can see it in the middle, is Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, lehit atef b'tzitzit, which means, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with the commandments and commanded us to enwrap ourselves with the tzitzit, with the fringes. And that, once again, I want to point out that we're specifically making that mitzvah, that blessing, and saying to wrap ourselves as we're doing the Tallit Gadol. If you don't wear a Tallit Gadol, you don't make that blessing. You just say the previous blessing, which is about on page 9, commanded us concerning the mitzvah of tzitzit. But if you're doing the proper wrapping, and then you're going to wear it as a wrap, so then you make this second blessing. Yes,
This is
Larry.
maybe a silly question. But
No question is silly. Go ahead.
Up until page 10,
It's said without
you
Tallit.
don't have to wear a tallit.
Not just you don't have to, you shouldn't.
Really?
Yeah, think about it. I don't know if you remember what we learned, but like these are all things that are.
Wrong for all these years.
What you've been doing from page 5?
Huh?
From Modani, you would start.
Yeah, I mean after.
So let me remind you.
After I wash my hands. And
Oh,
everything
okay.
else.
So you weren't doing it from the beginning.
Yeah, so
Modani, obviously, you can't be wearing Tallit and Tefillin yet. You haven't washed your hands even yet.
Right.
Netilat Yadayim is for washing your hands. Asher Yatzar is supposed to be a blessing after the bathroom, right? So
Right.
you do that right after that. Keep going. The same things with many of them. You want to make the blessings on studying Torah before you say, for example, these 3 lines on page 10, which come from Tehillim, from Psalms, which is technically a part of the Torah. You want to make a blessing on studying Torah beforehand. And then as part of making the blessing on studying Torah, we study some Torah right away, so that the blessing is not for no reason, right? So basically, all of that should happen before you put on Tallit and Tefillin. Okay? Now, so in other words, Tallit and Tefillin should happen at some point between page 10 and page 22.
I would have thought it comes before you say the blessing for the Torah, because that's where you think you want to be.
But look what we just did. Before we put on the Tallit, we spoke about wrapping, about how God wraps himself with light. It's an appropriate verse to say before Tallit, but it's studying Torah. So we have to make a blessing for studying Torah already, right? That's why.
I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Well, I'll get my sense. Well, I didn't do this stuff before anyhow, but now I.
Okay.
So
now you know. And now you know the rest of it. Well, that's what we come every week to learn. To learn and to grow. Okay. So let's keep going. So on page. Okay. All right. Now, once you have, as your tallit is wrapped around you, before you adjust it to wear it, you say the paragraph that Bob has been very eager to read. How precious! Go for it.
How precious is
Bottom
your
of page
kindness.
10.
How precious is your kindness, O God. The children of men take refuge in the shallow of your wings. They shall be satiated with the delight of your house, and you will give them to drink from the river of your bliss. For with you is the source of life, In your light we see light. Bestow your kindness upon those who know you, and your righteousness on the upright in heart.
Okay? And that's when you, right after this, you drape the talit over the head and shoulders and back during the entire time of prayer, as we all know, the regular way you wear it. Now, what are these different quotes that we've been doing? First, Baruch Nafshi, the top of page 10, and then Mayakra on the bottom. Both of them essentially hint at the same concept, which is that we find ourselves within the embrace of God. Now, that's really true at any moment of life, right, etc. But the talit is meant to envision that. What's the word I'm looking for? To give you imagery, to actually, like a ritual, to actually feel that. The talit is literally like a hug from God. That's what you'll see that hinted to in the text at the top of page 10, at the bottom of page 10, this concept of being in God's shadow, being wrapped in God with light as a garment, because the talit is supposed to be this hug from God. I'm not going to get into the whole Kabbalistic element of it, that it's like a makif, etc. Okay, once we, yes?
Can a woman say this part? I know you can't, obviously.
Absolutely, she can, yes.
Yeah, we can say how because it's a beautiful.
It's a beautiful prayer, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
She can say it even if it's not, if she's not putting it in the toilet. Okay. Now let's move on to Tefillin. Right? So we're back on page 61 in the textbook for those that are jumping around with me. If not, you're welcome to just listen to the class as a class. I feel like I'm constantly making you guys jump from book to book and from text to text. Anyways. The Torah commands us, "Ukshaitam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha." You should bind these words, meaning certain passages from the Torah, as a sign on your arm and between your eyes. And tradition teaches us that these somewhat cryptic instructions mean that we should make and wear tefillin. What are tefillin? Tefillin are essentially parchments that contain on them certain quotes from the Torah. There are 4 passages in the hand tefillin, 4 passages in the head tefillin. It's the same 4 passages in each one. Just in the head tefillin, they are divided into 4 compartments. So 4 separate scrolls inside 4 separate compartments. And in the hand tefillin, it's one long scroll that has it all on it inside one compartment in the hand tefillin. Most of these details have been passed down since Sinai orally. In other words, the elaboration that they should be square boxes and black, and it should come from a certain cut of the animal. It should only be from a kosher animal. You should dye it black, and you should write it on the parchment, with the parchment inside, how the parchment should be rolled, and there should be straps, and how the straps should be put on, etc. And tefillin are also supposed to be a reminder. What is the reminder of tefillin? Right? So with regards to tefillin, it says, "And it shall be to you as a sign on your hand and a reminder within your eyes, so that the Torah of the Lord may always be in your mouth. For with a mighty hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt." In other words, Hashem took us out of Egypt and performed countless miracles along the way and gave us the Torah to bring us into His service. That's what we're trying to do when we put on tefillin. We put on tefillin boxes containing passages of the Torah that talk about the Exodus, and all of the miracles that there were with the Exodus, and we put it on our arm directly across from our heart, and on our head directly across from our brain, in order to remember these things both in our mind and in our heart. Right? So that our thoughts should be connected to God. We should be part of the service of God with our thoughts and with our emotions. Why? Because Hashem took us out of Egypt and made us His people. So that is kind of the general meditation that is supposed to be tefillin. Now, let's read a couple of the texts about tefillin. So let's do text 2.
You said that they're always the same. You know, I mean, it's been passed down.
Tefillin have always been the same.
My grandson just got bar mitzvah. He's Haredi, and he had to get 2 different kinds of tefillin. If they're all the same, why is there 2 different? What's the difference?
Let's see if you can guess. Different opinions. Just the same reason why the mezuzah is slanted, same reason why we wear small tzitzit and big tzitzit. There's 2 different opinions about how the tefillin should be. Not major differences. It's literally just the order of the way the parchments are put inside the box.
Okay.
Probably your grandson is putting on Rashi's, which is Rashi's opinion, and Rabbeinu Tam, who was Rashi's grandson, who wore different types of tefillin than Rashi. Can you imagine? He argued with his grandfather about how to put on tefillin. I know, right? Argumentative much?
Because he said it was essentially he had to have these 2 different.
There are 4 different types in total. Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam, Ravid, and Shmuel Rabbah. The Rebbe used to wear all 4. The other 2 are not completely different. In other words, Rabbeinu Tam has a different head one and a different head one. I put on both every single morning. You know that.
Yeah,
You've seen that.
no,
So you're wearing 2 at a time.
No. You wear one, and then you wear one for the whole davening. Rashi, which is the main opinion, which is the one that he wears every single day, is Rashi. And then we do Rabbeinu Tam as an addition, as a bonus afterwards. What we do is we take off our Rashi, just say Shema in Rabbeinu Tam, just like as just in case, I guess. The other two, Raven and Shimosh Rabbah, are, I think one of them is only the hand is different, one of them only the head is different. So you kind of keep the hands from Rashi or whatever, and you use I'm not familiar enough, but that's the general concept.
But most men only have one.
Oh yeah, most men only have one pair of tefillin, Rashis. Yeah. In fact, even in Chabad, when my father turned bar mitzvah, it was not the custom that everybody should wear Rabbeinu Tams. It was kind of like a special thing. I think maybe only from 18 years old, or you have to write it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would approve that you should start putting them on, whatever it was, or after marriage. There was like different periods. And then at some point, the Rebbe said everybody from bar mitzvah on should start doing it. I believe the Rebbe connected with Mashiach. We're getting closer to Mashiach, so therefore we should have extra holiness in our life. Anyway, let's do text 2. Joyce, if you can read for us, please. On page 69, text 2. We're back in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Jewish Code of Law. I'm sorry, no, we did text 2. Text 3, at the bottom of page 69. Wearing tefillin during prayers. Huh?
70, right?
The English is at the top of page 7, yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Immediately after putting on this Tallit, which one should put on Tefillin so that you will be wearing them while reciting the Shema and Amidah. Whoever recites the Shema without wearing Tefillin is considered as he were giving false testimony concerning himself. For in the Shema he says, and you shall bind them as a sign, and he is not fulfilling this.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. So let me mention something. You may have noticed that as we've been going through this mitzvah Tallit and Tefillin in the Shulchan Aruch and in the Siddur, and even in the verses in the Torah, it doesn't say anywhere anything about praying in Tefillin and Tallit. The truth is that the mitzvah of Tallit and Tefillin, you guys are going to be blown away, is actually for the whole day. Ideally, a Jew should wear Tallit and Tefillin the entire day. And in Talmudic times, they wore Tallit and Tefillin the entire day. Except on Shabbat, yes, which we'll talk about in a different time. But the entire day, from sunrise until sunset. And back in the day, they did this. So you need to amend every vision you ever had about what a Talmudic study hall looked like, and put all the people now in Tallit and Tefillin. All right? Now, what? Yeah, even eating. Even washing up, everything, yeah. They would take them off only to use the restroom, to pass gas, obviously to bathe. But there was only very few times they would take them off. I believe they would eat in tefillin. They would take them off for sleep, so even if you took a nap during the day, you wouldn't sleep in tefillin. Now, the reason they would take them off during those times is because that is not appropriate behavior for tefillin. And today, now another behavior that's not appropriate for tefillin is to let your mind wander and to not think about tefillin. Now, back in the day, they were able to control their bodies enough to be able to do this, not to pass gas in tefillin, not to not to forget about the tefillin, right? Not to do anything, not to speak inappropriately. But today, unfortunately, we cannot. So halacha therefore shortened it, right? Or the rabbis shortened it over the time. They shortened it to just being for prayer. Because during prayer, that's a meditative time. That's a time when there's a mechitza, for example, right, which helps us for focus. That's a time when hopefully your phone is away, helps you focus, right? That at least for the time of prayer, you should be able to focus. Now, why are they doing so? So this is where the text that she read, text 3, comes in. The reason they said that it should be specifically during prayer is because the minimum amount you have to wear tefillin is for Shema. You cannot read the Shema and read the words, you should bind them for a sign on your arms and for a reminder between your eyes, and not be wearing tefillin. The Talmud says that's like bearing false testimony. It's like literally like coming to court and lying. Why? Because you're saying that you're supposed to wear tefillin and you're not wearing them. So at the very minimum, you have to be wearing them for the Shema. So because Shema ended up becoming part of prayer, so they said, okay, at least and the same thing, by the way, tzitzit is also mentioned in the 3 paragraphs of Shema. So if they said, at least you should wear your talit and tefillin, talit we mean the big talit, and tefillin, and a tefillin, at least for the Shema and for the entire prayer. Now, this may also explain to you something that you may have seen. For those of you that have been to Israel, especially in Jerusalem, you may have seen people walking around the streets of Israel, walking around the streets of Jerusalem wearing talit and tefillin. Have you seen this before?
Yeah, especially near the Chabad, because I stay in
Especially
the area where all the Chabad people are, and a lot of them are
not Chabadniks. No, it's not a Chabad custom.
Well, maybe they're on their way to prayer, because I see them on the streets, and they already come with their. So
if they're on the way to prayer, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But in the old city, you will see people that study the whole day. They study Torah and Tallit and Tefillin because they're still keeping this custom. They believe that they can control their minds to always be thinking about the Tefillin and not to be doing anything inappropriate in the Tefillin. And so they still do this. That is a thing that exists.
Well, the Chabad shul is like literally across
Right.
the park.
This particular custom that I'm mentioning now is not a Chabad custom. It could be it happens near the Chabad shul. That's fine. I don't know where it would happen. It could be Chabadics are walking around with Tallit and Tefillin because they're on the way to prayers, but it's not a Chabad custom to walk around with Tallit and Tefillin the whole day. Okay.
And do you, for all three prayers? Because obviously in Morav you have Shema, but you don't have it for Mincha. Right?
So my review don't wear Tefillin. Tefillin are only worn during the day.
Because
Tefillin and tzitzit are only worn during the day. The obligation for tzitzit is only during the day. I personally wear tzitzit under my shirt all 24 hours because I don't want to be even for a moment without tzitzit. In other words, when I wake up in the morning before I wake up, but it's already daybreak, right? I want to be wearing tzitzit. So that's a Chabad custom. Certainly not an obligation, but and tefillin is only during the day, so they would wear it for shacharit and mincha, but not for Arvit.
for Mincha. Okay.
Yeah, for Arvit they would not.
Thank you.
Okay, on page 64 we have some of the practical laws and customs for putting on the Tallit and the Tefillin. So you can go through that whenever you have time. Page 64 and 65. You see that Tallit and then Tefillin. We went through most of them. And I'm assuming the men that are here know how to put on Tallit and Tefillin. So I want to move on to the deeper perspective. And in order to get to the deeper perspective, we are going to read. First of all, when you put on Tefillin, it is very important to meditate on the meditations Tefillin are about. Now, if you remember, we said what the meditation is about. The meditation is about the fact that God took us out, the Exodus out of Egypt, and that He made us His people and commanded us to put on Tefillin. And you can see it in text 4. Vicky, if you can read it for us, please, page 70.
When putting on tefillin, one should keep in mind that the Holy One, blessed be He, commanded us to write these 4 passages which speak of the unity of God and the Exodus from Egypt, and to place them on the arm, opposite the heart, and on the head over the brain. This we should do in order to remember the miracles and wonders which He wrought on our behalf, and which reflect His unity, demonstrating that He has the power and the sovereignty to do as He desires in the upper realms and in the lower realms. One should therefore subjugate his soul, which resides in his brain, to the Holy One, blessed be He, and the desires and thoughts of his heart to His service. Thus, by putting on tefillin, he will remember the Creator, blessed be He, and minimize his pleasure seeking.
Thank you. So when we put on the Tallit and Tefillin, what we're trying to do, well, this is specifically talking about Tefillin, what we are trying to do is focus our lives, focus our minds, focus our hearts, so that our thoughts and our emotions are only for God. And we do this by this successive meditation. A few things in a row. First of all, God took us out of Egypt. He performed great wonders for us when He took us out of Egypt. He took us from slavery to freedom and made us His people. He brought us to Sinai, gave us the Torah, and commanded us to serve Him in this way. And therefore, our lives are indebted to Him, indentured to Him. And we should be His servants, and we should serve Him throughout our lives. Putting on Tallit and Tefillin is an expression of that servitude. Right? So that's kind of the meditation of Tallit and Tefillin. Again, that last point, which is called Shibud Alev V'Hamach, which means the servitude of our heart and of our mind. Right? Giving over our thoughts and our emotions to God. Now, I want to conclude with text 5, which is essentially a deeper mystical perspective on Tallit and Tefillin. You know, the Zohar compares the time of prayer to a time of battle. Shat Slota, Shat Krava, the Zohar tells us. That the time of prayer is a time of battle. Why? Because we're all familiar with the Tanya metaphor, which is that we have an animal soul and we have a godly soul, right? Not a metaphor, the Tanya observation, that we have a godly soul and an animal soul. Those two are constantly battling. And the main battle takes place during prayer. Why? Because you wake up in the morning, you do your thing, the first thing you do is you pray, and then that prayer is going to set the tone for the whole day. So during prayer, anybody who prays knows that this is a battle. It's automatically a battle. It's a battle between distraction. Your phone is there, it's buzzing. Your calendar is there. You know there's something you need to do already at 9 o'clock. At 8:30, you need to pop on a meeting. By 9 o'clock, by 7:30, maybe you need to be on the road, take the kids to school, whatever it is, right? The day is waiting. And prayer is a time when you're battling. You really are battling. Your godly soul and your animal soul are battling it out to try to focus, to try to be here in this moment with God, right? And so, continuing on this imagery, Tallit and Tefillin are our weapons. Let's see how the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Chabad Rebbe, describes this in text 5.
The time of prayer is a time of battle. So we must wear the Tallit and Tefillin, which become our shield, our shield and shelter us from distractions that array against us to sink us into lustful and negative thoughts. It is especially critical to wear Tallit and Tefillin during the
Kriyat Shema.
Kriyat Shema and the Amidah. This is because the negativity intensifies its effort and at that time to counteract the great spiritual power of these prayers. And we know that the acts of the mitzvot we perform create garments for the soul. These garments protect us from the arrows and missiles of negativity so they cannot touch us.
All right. Essentially, what he's trying to say is Tallit and Tefillin are our protection. They are our armor as we go into this war of battle. You wake up in the morning. Till now, we've been doing just thanking God for basics, right? And now you're about to literally get started and get ready for actual prayer, right? So you're putting on Tallit and Tefillin. Why? In order to be in the correct mode, correct protection for prayer. Why? Because we know that the moment that you're going to go into a space, I mean, like, not obviously you're going to the shul, right? You're going to go into a figurative space, to a mental space, where what you're going to be trying to do is to put yourself in a spiritual frame of mind for the whole day. So that when you get to that first meeting, or when you start to hit traffic, right, everything is more meaningful. That's the goal of prayer. To pray to God in the morning, have this connection that then will transform the way our whole day is going to go, right? And you get into this space where you're trying to be holy, and you're trying to praise God, and you're trying to have this connection with God, etc. And the nefesh habahamit, the animal soul is right there, the yetzer hara is right there, and he says, no, flipping away, not on my watch. And he comes with his arrows to try and pierce your focus, to try and pierce your spirituality and your holiness. The phone rings, or whatever. Honestly, I always say, this is not the biggest distraction, and this is not the biggest distraction, meaning the other gender, is not the biggest distraction. Those things help. The biggest distraction, very good, Angie, is the mind. Your own mind. Why is it that when I'm trying to pray, that's especially when all the different things come in, all of a sudden I remember the things I need to do, and that's, in Yiddish we say that's a halbetzara, that's only half as bad. The worst is when terrible thoughts come into your... I'm not thinking of these terrible things while I'm, I don't know, playing golf, but all of a sudden when I'm praying, all of a sudden these terrible thoughts come into my mind. Lashon hara about somebody else or whatever it is, right? Why is that? That's because the forces of negativity feel the battle. They feel this attempt. Good morning. The wrap club? Yes, in a minute, right after this class. We're wrapping up here? Go ahead, please, have a coffee, a tea.
Wrapping up.
Exactly, we're going to wrap up and then we're going to have the wrap club. So, the yetzer hara, the forces of negativity feel this. They feel that that's what you're trying to do. So they say, we're here with our arrows. And the Tallit and Tefillin, which, as I said, both have their meditation that goes with them, but are supposed to embody this protection, this spiritual bubble that you're creating around yourself with the Tallit and Tefillin. But that's why you're supposed to always remember that Tefillin are on you. You should never get distracted from the fact that you're wearing Tefillin. Right? You shouldn't walk by mistake into the bathroom. You should be aware at every moment you're wearing Tefillin. Because they are this protection from all the distractions of the world to try to help you to pray properly, etc. With this, we'll conclude Lesson 5, a wrap-up to remember. And if for the men here, you're welcome to hang around and join us for the Wrap Club, where we will be wrapping Tefillin in actuality. Please join us next week for Lesson 6, which is titled...
What's the schedule?
Next week, we are having a lesson as usual. There may not be bagels.
Yeah, I mean,
it's going to be very close to Passover. But we will have a class as usual. Next week's lesson is titled To Love a Fellow Soul. Thank you all for joining us.